So the other day I bought one of these low-cost ribbon microphones from TBONE. It's called the TBONE RB500, and it's one of many very similar ribbon microphones that you can get. If we have a look, we've got the Apex 210, which I used to have. There you go, the Apex 210. That came out in the early 2000s. And then we've got the Nadir SM, all these kind of ones, yeah? And then you've got your Cascade Fathead. They're more of a lollipop style, a little bit different, but T-Bone do their own lollipop one. And then you've got the Golden Age Projects mics. They do an active one and things like that. But I ended up getting the TBONE T-Bone RB500 just because it was in my price range. There you go. So it's £85 new, and I actually found it for £70 almost new online. So I decided to get it almost new. So for £70, I don't think you can get much more microphone for the money. I mean, the good thing with these ribbon microphones is that there's just basically nothing to them. I mean, inside the body, you've got your magnet, you've got your ribbon element, and a transformer, and a little bit of wiring, and that's basically it. And then most of the actual sound and the I mean, a lot of the more expensive microphones just have far better build quality, and there's acoustic dampening, and they've worked very hard on patented microphone bodies that reduce the resonance in certain ways, and that's why certain microphones like the Coles 4038 and things like that, they cost what they do, because there's a patent on it, and it's one of a kind mic. It sounds like how it does, and no one else can really build them. So unfortunately, some of these mics, the ribbon mics, are just so expensive, but at their core, they are just a ribbon, a magnet, and a transformer. So if you're going to buy a cheap microphone, a ribbon mic is one of the best options, because there's not it's actually quite hard to cheap out on the parts because there's so little of them. Whereas, we've all seen these cheap condenser microphones, and a lot of them are getting good. There's been a few, for probably 10 years, for about 10 years now, there's been some amazing low-cost condenser microphones. There are some older ones as well that I would definitely say. Things like the Octava are amazing. There's anyway, we're not going to go down the condenser route. Let's talk about ribbons. But you can see there's a lot of these cheap microphones out there. There's cheap ribbons, and a lot of them are quite similar. But I went for the RB500 pretty much because it's based in the you can buy from the UK, which is nice. A lot of these are American only, or they're hard to get in the UK. It's passive. I didn't really want an active ribbon because I've got good preamps, and the active circuit inside a lot of these, like the Golden Age Project one here. I've heard a lot of people say the active ones actually don't sound quite as nice because there's more in the way of the signal, and it's not as good a components. Whereas, this thing, 85 quid, it's completely passive. It's got, I think, what is it, a 2 micron, something like that. I think it's 2 micron aluminium ribbon. And 2 micron, if it is micron, please correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 microns is about the same specification that RCA used and the BBC used. I think they used a 2.5 in a lot of those early 1940s and 50s microphones. So the benefit of having a thin ribbon is that you actually preserve a bit of the treble of the microphone. The thinner the ribbon, the faster it will respond, and you will get more. Obviously, bass frequencies are more powerful than higher frequencies, so bass frequencies are always going to come through on a ribbon microphone strongest. But if it's if the ribbon is as thin as possible without being extremely fragile, it will react faster and better to those higher frequencies that a thicker ribbon would just it wouldn't make a dent. So the Apex 210 back in the day, and a lot of these mics, they came with like a 6 or a 7 micron, and I think that was probably so it could survive shipping from China. Whereas nowadays a lot of these the quality control's better, the standard of the shipping's got a lot better, and these ones that are supplied from TBONE, they've all got 2 micron ribbons, which was one of the only mods that people used to do with these things was put a thinner ribbon in them. That's quite hard to say. But yeah, so if we come right up on the microphone, you can really hear that proximity effect starting to work. And if I back off the mic, you can hear we've got a little bit of hum in the background. That's from my PC. We don't have a shock mount on this stand, so there's a bit of vibration coming through. But I can't hear much preamp hiss, so they can't be that low output. You know, I think you'd be all right miking up a guitar from a few feet with this, as long as you've got a half decent interface. I'm not using an external pre. I'm using just the inbuilt pre on my UR824 here. So yeah, it's a Steinberg interface with Yamaha D preamps. They're a bit aged now, to be honest, but I do think it sounds alright. And then the actual signal chain we're using, at the moment I'm using the Cloud compressor limiter that I've got here. Cloud CX335 it's called. Not many people have heard of this unit. I'm just going to bypass it there. And there was a bit of a gain difference, but coming back on there, you can hear it's set to quite a hard compression. And then what I also really like using is this Joe Meek SC 2.2 that I've got. And this is an optical compressor, so small little light bulbs inside that soak up the volume basically when it gets too loud or beyond a certain point. But it's a bit different to how normal compressors work, is the Joe Meek, because it doesn't have an adjustable threshold. You've just got to sort of modulate the input and the output and the slope setting, which is like your knee, and this here, which is literally like a 1 to 10 compression dial. It's all a bit odd. I mean, you do have attack and release, which is cool. That's a bit more familiar. But yeah, you've just got to use your ears and look at the VU and see how it's moving. And I really like it. It's quite non-linear and vibey as a compressor. This would be quite hard to reproduce in a plugin, apparently. It's got this dark mode. If you turn that off, it becomes a little bit more obvious, I feel. You can hear more pumping and more sort of compression artifacts. Whereas when you turn the dark mode on, it's a little bit more non-linear and a little bit harder to sort of... It's more transparent, basically. So on, if you're using this as a master bus compressor, which you can do very easily because it's there's something in this compressor that level matches between the two, the left and right, so you don't get drift and things like that with this compressor. It's good on a bus, and that dark mode can just sort of... It means you can get away with harder compression without realising, because it doesn't thump and pump as much. When you have both of these on together, it'll probably sound quite extreme indeed. But what I tend to do, if I'm using these two in tandem, I'll have the attack set a little bit slower than the fastest setting on that, and that's going to let some of those pops and spikes through. And then I'll just have this on soft knee and have it on about that, and then basically, if I do happen to go above a certain level on this, it'll just take 1 or 2 dBs off, and it'll just tighten it up a little bit because, like I say, this is set a little bit slower, so it's going to let those pops through, and then those pops are finally taken off uniformly by this cloud here, because it won't let anything go above threshold. There you go. So I'd have it probably set like that. So that's them two on, and then them two off. So this is with no compression at all, none of the units on, just the roll signal. And then this is with the 2 units enabled. So yeah, that's my signal chain. I feel like ribbons work quite well with vibey compressors and odd things like the Joe Meek. The Joe Meek being an optical, obviously back in the day, one of the only compression types you could get was an optical, and they're quite slow and they're quite non-linear and they react just in their own way. They've got a bit of a vibe to them, and I feel like that complements the whole thing with the ribbon. It's a bit vintage. What could I use this microphone on? I think if you had thinner sounding sources, maybe like cheaper instruments, cheaper percussion, cheaper drum kits, they might not ring and have a nice bassy sound to them in the room. But with a microphone like this, it could really support and add body into the signal and to the instrument before it even reaches your converters. So that's going to be really useful. Obviously, it's a nice bassy sounding mic. It's going to support thinner sounding things. Also, with it being a ribbon, it's going to naturally taper off on the high end, and you're not going to have much after 15 kilohertz. So if you've got something like an acoustic guitar where the guy's strumming and it's just sounding bright, it's taking your ears off if you've got a pencil condenser on it, I could see something like this being quite useful at just taming an instrument, again, before it reaches your converters. And that means that you don't need to make as extreme EQ changes, so you're going to have better phase coherence if you're using more than one microphone on the source. You're going to just have a more you're going to, you know what I'm saying, don't you? Different mics sound different. Use them like an EQ, and you could get the best of both worlds then, and you don't have to do as much in your editor, and it's just nicer for everyone. So I could think, because this is quite a bassy microphone, it's got a lot of bass, not much treble, I can imagine a pairing with this and a pencil condenser, or maybe this and an Omni dynamic, like an Electro Voice 635 or a Bayer M58 that I've got a few of those, and I like those. They're quite gritty, present sounding microphones, whereas this is obviously more bassy, and just that combination, you could get a very broad range of tone there. So yeah, it's fun to mess around with these vibey mics that have a very obvious sound to them, and it just gives you intuition then. Well, I know how this sounds in the room, so I want to put the mic that's going to do the opposite of that, or maybe it's going to embellish what I want to hear already. And it's fun. It's like having different colours in your paint palette, rather than painting in grey and then putting it in Photoshop, I guess, and adding colour to it there. Not to diss neutral mics. I've got neutral mics as well, and everything's useful. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed this. This has been about 13 minutes of me sort of esoterically rambling on an 85 quid mic. How do you value your time? But yeah, I'd go out and buy one of these again. I might get another, and because why not? Just get another. So, what are you doing? Why are you still here? Go do something else. Bye.